Hello, and thank you once again for joining us here at Alpha News. Today we are joined virtually by Matt Benda, a longtime Minnesota attorney with an agricultural background who's now running to fill the seat unfortunately left vacant by Congressman Jim Hagedorn's untimely passing earlier this year. Mr. Benda, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me today. You can tell I'm dressed casually. It's a work day. I'm putting up lawn signs, out meeting businesses and door knocking. So it's a beautiful day in Minnesota today. So it's good to be here. Thanks
Absolutely.
for letting me up here.
Of course, of course. Where are you door knocking at? Where's the primary focal point of your campaign right now?
Well, I try to get everywhere. Today I'm in my home area of Albert Lee and Austin areas where I'm at today. Tomorrow I'll be over in Jackson where I grew up, and then over to Laverne. I'm trying to hit each end of the district. And for me, it's a joy. It's just to meet people and hear their stories. It's my favorite part about the campaign is the friends that I've made and the people I've been able to connect with. And really that represents my entire campaign. It's just I really am the grassroots candidate. And that's really where my power base lies. That's where my unique skills lie. And so I'm really enjoying that part of the campaign.
Tell us, what motivated you to embark on this journey? Because running a campaign is no easy task. Becoming an elected official is no easy task at all. And it doesn't seem like you have a lot of political background. So what motivated you to hop into this arena?
Yeah, my political background, again, is just being involved in the party, involved in my community, and just being a real active member of wanting to make a difference in the community and building a unique skill set. My awakening, quite frankly, happened February 18th, the day after Jim Hagedorn died. My wife called me and she shared with me the upsetting news, and she said, "Matt, this is something you've considered, for years, that it might be a calling. We thought it would be out in the future, but you have to consider now is now the time that God's asking you to share your skills." And her and I decided together that the country really needed some really calming voices, needed some good common sense, and we just felt like now was the time to step forward. As I've been campaigning for 2.5 months, when I started, I thought the country was in a bad shape and heading in the wrong direction. And 2.5 months later, it just keeps getting worse. Every day we read the news, it's just like the country is just fiscally and morally deteriorating quickly. And I really feel like we need some good Minnesota common sense out in DC. So that was my wake up call, is the day after. And literally the call was from my wife saying, "Do you want to consider doing this? You have the skills and people have asked you to consider it. Now is probably the time for you to offer your services."
Well, absolutely. I think many of our viewers would agree with you that the country is declining, both fiscally and morally, and that seems like a good jumping off point into your policies. What specifically do you plan to advocate should you attain office in DC?
So since day one I've started, I hit three main issues. Number one being energy independence. We have a great, unique setup down here in the first district. We have ag, just a strong ag community. We have small business. And I feel like those are the people and the engine of growth in our country. And so I think we can look to the first district on all these great assets that we have and move forward. So for me, energy independence is the launching point for that. I talk a lot about how quickly, when we lost that energy independence, how quickly the country became weak, and that translated into chaos in the world. And what we're seeing in the Ukraine right now is just a continued disaster in the making. I'm concerned that as a result of the Joe Biden policies, not only is Ukraine suffering from just war crimes and just terrible disasters, we got to help rebuild that country eventually too. And so throwing our money, the latest proposal to throw money at the effort, just is, it seems like we just continue to, as a country under Joe Biden, he creates crises and then just throws money back at them. And so that's very concerning to me. The other issue I hear from everybody every day is concern over transparency in the classrooms, making sure parents can show up to school board meetings and be involved and not have the United States Department of Education and their agendas being driven down to this local level. And finally, I am the champion of election integrity. From day one, I got into this race. I've been using my legal analysis skills and quickly realizing that we have to take this election integrity issue head on. And I'm doing that personally in this campaign. I've sent 5 requests for information to county auditors and the election officials. And I really want to make this about us pressure testing the election right here, right now during this election. So I'm not talking about some hypothetical future election integrity issues. I'm talking about right now hitting this issue head on.
Absolutely. I want to talk about all three of these ideas: Ukraine, I want to talk about elections, and I want to talk about schools. These are all very important issues. Beginning first with Ukraine, what is your foreign policy there specifically? What would you advocate as a member of Congress for how the U.S. should orient itself relative to that situation right now?
First of all, I would have been certainly supported more. Keep the no-fly zone, allow some of the planes coming from other NATO countries. I think that early on, I was very concerned when Joe Biden, when this started, he wanted to offer to airlift Zelensky out of there from day one. That was just again a classic example of poor policy decisions at that level. So I certainly would have advocated for a more aggressive approach from the beginning. Now I feel like we just need to continue to support them, support our NATO allies. They have stepped forward. I'd like to see NATO do more. And what would I do as a congressman? I talk about those issues. I'd be on the front of the lines to help them. And for me, it'd be coming from an ag perspective. So there's some real concerns with Ukraine right now. Their country is effectively destroyed. The fourth largest wheat producer in the world may not get more than 30 to 40% of their crop in the ground, which has rippling effects. And so for me, I would continue to look through everything through the lens of the first district. And I am a first district candidate. I come from the grassroots. I'm not going to DC to work with special interest groups. I have my cell phone right here, which has more text. More people can text me in the first district than ever before. So that's what I tell people when I'm sitting at the committee. I want them to text me. I don't want to be listening to lobbyists or people that have advocated for other things outside of the district. So that's really what drives me.
Absolutely. Very important to have somebody that's more answerable to their constituents than to the lobby groups, something that seems to be lost on many legislators. My last thing about the Ukraine situation, how do you respond to critics who say that instituting a no-fly zone or taking a more active role could put us in direct conflict with Russia?
It's hard to say that we're not. When Vladimir Putin is taken as aggressive as position as he is, and now even in the last few days, apparently the U.S. may have been involved in some of the intelligence sharing. When those type of activities are happening in the world, and we defend ourselves by saying, "Oh, I'm afraid somebody might be mad at us," it just for me that doesn't translate. It doesn't hit the common sense in Main Street that we should not do the right thing or help people in those type of terrible situations because we're afraid Vladimir Putin's going to be mad at us. I certainly don't talk. I don't advocate for us escalating, but we can't always vacillate either.
Of course, of course. Moving now to education, this is something that, gosh, it feels like the last 6 or 7 months has come roaring into the public consciousness, especially since parents started seeing what their children are learning, in these schools during distance learning or Zoom learning or whatever you want to call it. What measures do you advocate there to help normalize that situation?
And you're right, it has been a wake-up call. I mentioned earlier in the 2.5 months I've been running it, just more and more of these stories continue to come out. And of course, the documentary "Whose Children Are They" just really brought it into focus in terms of this isn't just an isolated effort. And so, what do I think I can do as a congressman? I support the idea that a congressman needs to share their voice across all spectrums. And so a lot of my opponents say, "Oh, it's a local issue and not a national issue." I don't buy any of that. If there's people at the local level that are my constituents and they feel like either the federal government or the state government is overstepping or forcing something on our parents or on our schools, I'm willing to share my voice with them to help them give them legitimacy. And I think that's what we should do as leaders, not just as a congressman, but just as leaders in our communities. We should always share our voices. And that does translate, of course, back to the federal level. The Department of Education should not be sending money to the states that's tied to any type of curriculum or any type of results driven. That's just unacceptable. So I think at a federal level, we certainly have to stop any finger, putting the scale on their finger on the scale of education from that federal level. And so I do think that education is a federal, it's an everybody issue. And so I continue to tell people if and when I'm elected, they need my help, I'm certainly willing to help them. And I do that now. I talk to school board members. I talk to people in Rochester about what they're doing and helping them with their campaigns. And so I do believe it's a real grassroots. It is. Just because I'm a congressman doesn't mean I'm only going to be infatuated with the bright lights and the folks in DC. We have to stay connected with our roots.
I think you're correct in identifying that education is an issue at multiple levels, ranging from the federal level down to the school board. How do you think it got to be this egregious, apparently without anybody noticing?
There have been people out there that have been concerned about this for years, and I think we all just got distracted with our lives. I certainly was, busy raising a family and building my law practice, and I think it was just easy to be complacent. And I think that this has just been a wake up call in the last year when you hear people stepping forward and calling out and finding out that this is actually happening in the classrooms. You can hardly find textbooks anymore that don't have these curriculums built into them. That just tells us that this has been coming for a while, and so it has been a wake up call. I certainly, like I said, I woke up February 18th and decided this is something I really need to put my heart and soul into, and we've watched it continually to cascade from there. And there is a lot of passion out there in the communities. And right now, I think we need to listen to people that are concerned and help them to push back and be heard.
Of course. Tell us a little bit about election integrity, because there are a few issues right now, barring maybe pro-life, that are this divisive. When you start talking about election integrity, words like conspiracy theorist and theft, these words get thrown around, and there's serious consequences for people's political careers. How would you approach this?
Well, how I am approaching it is I'm making it about here and now in this election. And so when I talk about election integrity, I'm talking about making sure my election is fair, pressure testing this election right here, right now. And I do think that is a different approach than what we've heard. People can call me conspiracy, they can call me names, which I'm sure they will. But all I'm doing is running an election, trying to get elected, asking for fair treatment, and asking that we hold local election officials accountable. And they do get very defensive. I understand that. But all we're doing is asking them to allow us to inspect, look at these machines, look at their software, look at the history, and just look at the system all the way through.
Yeah, generally in our business here at Alpha News, if you start asking questions and people get defensive and they stop talking to you, that means something. And that means you should be putting more eyeballs on the problem rather than less.
Thank you. I mean, as an attorney as well, when somebody tells me, oh, you're asking the wrong questions, or we can't share that information, or it's protected, my instincts kick in, and it just makes me go after it stronger, and the perseverance. I mean, I talk a lot about my homegrown values and growing up on the farm and perseverance. And I understand being stubborn and in this for the long haul. And on this election issue, I think we all have to be in this for the long haul. They're going to continue to put up smoke screen and barriers and call us names and trying to discourage us. But we just need to continue to move forward and ask the tough questions like you do. And that's what I do in my job. And I think that's the job of politicians. If you're really serious about election integrity, you shouldn't just be talking about something hypothetical or say, oh, I tried in the past to fix stuff. You should be able to say, what am I doing right here, right now to fix the problem? And that's what I'm doing, is trying to fix the problem today.
I'm interested about this long haul approach you have, because I think there's sort of two ways that people are thinking about elections right now. Either this is an issue that we're going to fix with one series of reforms and the conversation will be over, or on the other camp, you have people that think this is going to be sort of a new frontier of American politics. We're going to have, the abortion debate, we're going to have the gun control debate, and we're going to have the election integrity debate every election cycle. And just personally, I believe that it's going to become a mainstay of American political life, talking about these issues.
Well, first of all, election integrity should be a constant discussion. We should always make sure it's front and center, and that we make sure that our elections are trustworthy and transparent. And so I do think election integrity should be an issue we talk about continually. The other issues, I mean, you asked the question about abortion, just the idea that there was a leak within the Supreme Court. Okay, so let's analyze that. So people tell us you should support trust the court system because there's a lot of integrity, but we found out that potentially just one person was able to cause that much problem and that much uproar in the country. Translate that to election integrity, and all these local officials tell me, oh, just trust us. We have good people here. Nobody here in this office, would be untrustworthy. But as we all know, anytime there's human component to a system, it just only takes one person to upset the apple cart. And so I think there's a good relationship there between we should trust institutions, but only to a point where we can hold them accountable and ask them the tough questions. And so I think there is an important issue there that we have to always hold people accountable and have transparency. And just because I'm asking questions doesn't mean I have a conspiracy theory. I got other things to worry about than creating something that's not there. And so I can't accept the fact that people like to call name calling when you ask tough questions. That's just not acceptable.
And that's a very astute point. If the highest court in the land can be compromised by what is probably one law clerk with a political opinion, why do we think that your local ballot box, your local voting station is somehow beyond reproach? It's a good point.
That's for me. And so I always tell people, I said, I trust and I like my local election people, right? They're good people. I know them, but it doesn't mean that this person sitting next to them, or maybe they're compromised. Maybe it's not a political agenda. I mean, we know that cybersecurity is based mostly on human error. I mean, they spent a lot of time to tighten up the security systems of our computers and within our workplaces and your workplace, but it only takes one person to breach protocol, either intentionally or unintentionally, for these systems to break down. And so
Absolutely.
again, I don't want to overemphasize election integrity, but I do want to overemphasize it. It's that important of an issue that I talk about all the time. And with my legal training, I just have been able to just zero in on this issue and say, there's so many people out there trying to address this issue. I'm trying to get everybody on the same page, add some credibility to the discussion, and just zero in on let's pressure test these systems, make sure they work well, and get to a point where it's acceptable to ask these tough questions. I don't think, again, we should assume I'm calling somebody untrustworthy. They should want to disclose their systems. They should want to prove that their systems are trustworthy. I think that's an important part of our democratic system.
Of course. Speaking of systems and how they can break down, what do you make of these rumors, reports, whatever you want to call them, of impending food shortages? I understand you have a pretty extensive agricultural background. What's your take?
I do have real concerns over food shortages worldwide, and it's going to be based upon different regions. So I talked about Ukraine earlier. So Ukraine exports, let's say, for example, one of their larger export markets is Egypt. Egypt is having food inflation. Early on, it was like 25% a month food inflation. The countries like Lebanon, we're talking like 1,000% food inflation. And so when you talk about food shortages, it's going to be localized food shortages. And so a lot of countries now are not exporting. Everybody's kind of getting very close to the vest. They don't want to export anything. And once again, I believe in the power of the American farmer, the ingenuity, the hard work of the American farmer, of small businesses. And I believe the American farmer will step up and increase food production. They'll make sure that we get as much food into the system as possible. I have no doubt that our dairy farmers, our hog farmers, we're going to continue to help provide the support we can around the world. But there's going to be parts of the world that are going to suffer, and there's going to be a volcano could erupt at any time. If you start to get food shortages in countries around the world, that can easily escalate into more chaos throughout the world. So I do have real concerns that may continue to escalate just because of food insecurity.
Tell us about your ag policy more broadly. What do Minnesota farmers need to produce the food to feed the country?
Two things. They need less government intrusion. And so when we talk about getting rid of inflation, I talk about getting rid of friction within the system, fewer rules and regulations. I've been fighting as an attorney, working with small businesses and farmers. I've been working, against the IRS, against the USDA, against all these different agencies, ditch petition, whoever it is, I've been working against them. And so I understand how one small regulation can make a big difference. So that is, number one issue. Number two, people in southern Minnesota and around the country, we need workers. And so, we need to find a way to tap into the potential that we have and find a stronger workforce. And so I think those are the two things I talk the most about: eliminating regulations and friction and strengthening our workforce.
Absolutely. I was going through your campaign website and I saw a reference to something, I think you call it the Old Acre Way.
Right.
What is that? Tell us about that.
The Old Acres Way it's a series of articles I wrote a few years back about growing up on the farm. And so I'm the youngest of 5 kids in a farm family. I always say I grew up in the 80s, and so my family didn't necessarily want me to come back to production agriculture, but they still taught me to believe in my communities, believe in the farm community. And I tell these stories about growing up on the farm because they translate into who I am today and who I think a lot of people that grew up in smaller communities, they have this good work ethic. They understand the importance of the value of a dollar, being true to your word, perseverance. I talk a lot about that. As a country, we need to persevere through these difficult times. And so those stories, and I had a meet and greet last night, and I like to tell farm stories. So I'll try to think of one here quick. So I talk about growing up, and my dad always we'd bale hay, and so every year for years, you got these little square bales, and so you got square bales, and you throw them up in the hay mound, and you spend your day doing that. And I always said to my dad, "Why don't you get one of these big round balers? They make the big bales, and you don't have to have the throw the bales around." And my dad said, "Well, the cattle like the square bales; it's easier to feed them." Well, I then went off to college, and the next year I come back, and sure enough, my dad has the round baler. His cheap labor had left for college, and so those type of stories are they're just examples of where I come from, and I think it's important people recognize the genuine authenticity of my campaign because I can sit down with people, I can connect with them, but then through my legal training, I can quickly get out of my shirt, put on my suit and tie, and I'm not afraid to take on the Hormel former exec or go into the boardrooms or go anywhere I need to. I'm used to stepping from those different worlds, and if I need to fight and I need to put my nose to the grindstone, I'm not afraid to do that. But it needs to be for the right reasons. I'm afraid that if too many people go to Washington, D.C., and all they're worried about is their conservative credentials or their voting record, and they're not worried about making real reform, I'm concerned that the first district would not be as well served. We need somebody that's going to go to DC and fight for what they believe in, but not worry about just having straight ticket credentials. They need to be able to make decisions that are best for the first district. And I am a little concerned, some of my opponents, they talk about being outsiders, but, Brad Finstead, we knew going in, he had a lot of establishment support from DC and from St. Paul. And now Munson, Jeremy Munson has made a pivot as well. He's been touting some of these endorsements he's getting from DC, and he has pivoted now to being more of an insider. Those guys, they're getting caught up in some of these DC power plays. And I have concerns that we need somebody that's going to go to DC to just fight for the first district and not get caught up in those power plays in DC. And so I think that does make me unique.
And that's something I wanted to ask you about is how do you separate yourself from the other Republicans seeking the same position? And it seems like that's the answer right there, that you view yourself as the true outsider in this race.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, my fundraising, my support was a groundwell of support from within the district. I raised the most money, and 97% of that was from within the first district. And for me, it just shows that people support me not because I'm necessarily Republican or I've thrown any bombs out there. They support me because they know I can get things done. I stay true to my word. I work hard. And so that's what makes me different is I'm not looking to put anybody else's name on my campaign. When I'm in a commercial, it's me. There's nobody else saying, "Oh, trust Matt Benda." You just trust me because you know me. And so I think that does make me unique. And I don't think they know what to do with me, quite frankly. I'm kind of an anomaly in this race because I raise the money. I have the name recognition. But I don't have these outside names trying to put their stamp or their influence on this race. And so I hope that shows through. It's hard with a lot of candidates, a lot of money being spent, but I just continue to move forward. Like I said, I'm in my T-shirt today. I'm out meeting with people face to face and one voter at a time, putting up signs. It's really refreshing to me to recognize that there's a lot of people out there that believe in that authentic approach. And they don't necessarily want to listen to outsiders that tell them how to vote. They should decide for themselves and not rely on what somebody else is telling them to do.
Absolutely. I mean, to your credit, it is remarkable the level of fundraising you've attained without any endorsements, without any big names on board. How does that work? How did you accomplish that?
Again, it's just I know people all the way across the district, and people believe in me. And so, you talk about when you fundraise, the first thing you go to the people you know. And if they put a check behind your name, it means they believe in you. And so people just believe I can make a difference. And just again, I think they see the authenticity. People are tired of this divisive politics. There's no reason you can't send a conservative like me that is still common sense and doesn't want to create wedges or pick fights that don't need to be picked. People believe in that, so I am a unique candidate in that way, that I have that kind of grassroots support without the endorsements or the big names behind me. Of course, now I wear it as a badge of honor. It just means that they're fighting over who can get the biggest endorsements or get the most outside money. I'm just focusing on telling people what I stand for and what I want to do in this campaign, and that's organically gotten me a lot of support.
Of course, of course. One of the final items I want to ask about is your legal background. You've mentioned it several times. I haven't asked about it specifically. Tell us about that work.
So for 25 years, I've been in Albert Lea. I say I'm an ag attorney, but really in a small town, you kind of just take care of people. And so I do everything from evictions and real estate to, I used to do divorces. Helping people through those family tough situations, financial situations. But in the last 5 to 7 years, I've been focusing just on farm law, agriculture, and helping businesses. So I do a lot of business transactions, and that's what's brought me into the Rochester area, just doing business transactions, larger business transactions all across the first district. And so I've been doing that for 25 years. I'm the managing partner here at the law firm. That's where I'm at today. This is my bookshelf. I got this great book collection back here that I don't have time to read anymore. And so that's really, I am a small town practitioner, but Albert Lea is a regional center. And so my practice certainly isn't limited to this area. I've helped people all across the district, like I said, from Laverne all the way over to the east part of the state. So that's my background as an attorney. And I've also used that. I've always believed that if you're going to live in a community, you need to give back. And so my wife and I have been very active in the community, just always making sure I share my skills. I help people along. I help them when they're underprivileged. I do volunteer legal work. I just really believe that you have to have that community connection to really, especially in these circumstances, to go to DC, you got to stay grounded. I consider myself a candidate that I'm all about the first district. I put the first district first. I'm not going to DC to, again, lead any caucus. I'm just going to DC to make a difference for our constituents, and this will always be my home. My wife and I are committed to calling the first district our home. I have no desire to change my address to Georgetown. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I don't know who would want to live in Georgetown. It's expensive. There's high crime. Is there anything that I haven't gotten to that you want to be sure we cover?
Again, for me, it's an appeal to voters just to say, make the decision based upon what you feel is right for you and not what somebody else is telling you. There's a lot of people out there, who's the best candidate for this or that? I think the question is, who's the best candidate to beat the Democrats, go to DC and focus on real reform and not just trying to boost their voting record, and then who can get reelected. Right now, it's a Republican year. It'd be good to get some really solid conservatives there, but you need somebody that's going to continue to be connected to the people and get reelected. And I think I'm the candidate that meets all of those boxes. And I think people just really need to think big picture when they decide who they're going to vote for.
Absolutely. If people want to keep up with your campaign, learn more about you, where can they do that?
bendaforcongress.com. And the most important message is you got to vote now. This primary is really unique. It's May 24th. We're the only one on the ballot. And so that really matters. It's just get out there and vote and take your friends and family with. It's hard to get it on people's radar this time of the year that there's actually an election coming up. So I appreciate you guys giving us the coverage it deserves. I appreciate the questions and look forward to seeing you again, I hope soon.
Absolutely. And we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.